shared by a lot of stat folks. Looking at center by itself is dangerous. Because looking at center by itself, Bert and Ernie are the same student. But clearly, some of the first things you guys said was, wait, Bert's less consistent than Ernie. So looking at just center and not deviation or dispersion is kind of a dangerous gig. Likewise, looking just at deviation without looking at center is dangerous. Can you see how that would be dangerous? If you only looked at variation without looking at the centers? This is a very tricky question. If you don't have an answer, it's okay. Faith, go!
Well, if he had low variation, like they were all on the lower end of like the 60s, I identified on my team.
That's exactly my point. Suppose you ignore the averages. Ernie has a variation of 1.6, Bert has a variation of 16. But Ernie's average is like a 56. So he's consistently awful, right? Whereas Bert is inconsistently a B student. That, you see, without the average, knowing what you have an idea for there is, it's kind of like going out in the woods with, or going to the target range with a buckshot. You got a tight cluster. Unfortunately, you're shooting for the target over here and you hit your neighbors, right? That's kind of what ignoring the average is. Are you aiming for the center? Are you hitting the center? That's the average. Deviations goes, how well are you hitting the center? How close are you getting to the center? So that's why, in my opinion, these guys right here need to be linked together. You can't separate them. We learn them separate. I think that's a good idea. Trying to learn them all at the same time is a little bit much, but you have to kind of piece them together. Once you've got both pieces, we really can't ignore them ever again, because they give us such a wonderful, full picture of a data set. Not only where the center is, but how spread are we around that center? Are we tighter? Are we looser? Does it matter? Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it matters a whole hell of a lot. That's why I didn't want to get rid of data points earlier, Aaron. About an hour ago, you said, well, just trim off some of the outliers. I generally don't want to do that, especially if I know the outliers are outliers in a correct mathematical sense, which we will get to, David. I know you're going to ask me when. With those quartile adjustments, we just looked at the Q1, Q3. Outliers make more sense to discuss in there. Now, Davidson, you asked me earlier, margin of error. I love that. I love that question. And again, we're not going to get into the computation of it until 244. No. We're going to use it in 243. We've already started, and I'm going to keep using it in 243. Computing it is a bit, it's kind of like that calculation right there, but done over and over again on different data sets. And it gets tedious. But being able to go into a study like a Gallup poll or a Rasmussen poll or a Time or a Newsweek poll and to extract out a margin of error and apply it properly, that's 243. That's what we've been doing. The problem is people ignore it. I'll give you three examples. One of which I just read last Friday, I think it was. Give you an example of improper statistics at work. So Washington Post has a series of blogs, and somebody, I'm Italian. My usual greeting is a hug for someone. And I understand that upsets people sometimes. And I try to read people if they're, are you a hugger? Are you not a hugger? I screwed up once in the past 10 years, as far as I know. Because I gave this guy a hug, he's like, oh, we're hugging. And when people say that, I know I stepped over a bound. He wants to kind of diffuse the situation. So anyway, I read the story on don't hug me. Don't hug me. And I was like, oh, this is cute, and this is going to be good. This is going to be good for me. Because maybe this is going to give me quantifiable reasons as to why I shouldn't do that. Even though in Europe, it's a couple quick peck on the cheek. In Turkey, it's boom, 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 3 on the cheek. We're in America. We're not in Turkey. We're not in Europe. So I read down, I'm reading the data this person is using, and they said, it's just been shown, and I checked the study did show this, that the fist bump is the most hygienic greeting. And the first thing I think of, oh my God, compare it to a hug, and I'm thinking, a hug? I don't actually touch anybody's skin, unless they're naked. But if we're both clothed, I hug you, my hands are on your clothed back, I'm not slamming my head into you. So what the study talked about was the fist bump versus the handshake versus a high five. Those are the 3 they looked at. And mathematically, there's less skin contact with a fist bump, right? So then I thought to myself, how did this author tie in the hugs? And the quote was, they didn't include the hug in their study, but we all know that if they had, they would have shown the hug was just as bad as a handshake. This got into the Washington Post.
Really? Wow.
This got into the Washington Post. Now for me, Washington Post, legitimate. Now, I question everything they put out, because if that got through, that kind of lame ignorance of statistics got through, what else is in there that might be full of crap, right?
That's very
No, but you're
debatable.
like close to the amount.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you are or aren't, Joanne, I'm saying they didn't even bother using the study. They quoted a study, but put their opinion next to scientific fact.
Oh.
That's my point. I'm not saying that. I was taken aback by it for a second. I thought about it. I'm like, okay, this makes sense. But then I realized they just fact. If they had included it, oh yeah, and if we had included, I don't know, grass clippings and cancer drugs, maybe we kill more cancer cells. Right? You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm getting at. Now that's a very obvious ignorance of statistics, yes. But there are some that are not so obvious. And I want to share a few more. That one just came through in the past couple days, and you don't have to work very hard to find these, friends. You don't. So I want to share a couple more with you that ignore the margin of error, because I want to go back. David